Hello and welcome to today's webinar on capability maps. My name is Wolfgang Goebl and I'm the president of the Intersection Group. And maybe just a couple of words why we are doing what we are doing. I've been working as an enterprise architect for I think 70 years or so, and after a couple of years, I came to the conclusion that it can be really frustrating because we have kind of a very limited impact as enterprise architects. And this business IT alignment thing, we discuss it, never really worked. And I'm super happy that so many people are here today. The capability webinar is usually the one with the most attendees from Intersection Group. So that must be a topic. And I think we are enterprise architects are not super successful with this concept, even if it's an important one. Some administrative words. There will be a recording, so all registrants will receive the recording after the show, and you will have maybe 10-15 minutes after the presentation to discuss your questions. So whenever there's a question, type it to the chat, and I'm gonna answer it after maybe a 30 or 40 minutes presentation. Who are we? We as Intersection Group, we are a not-for-profit association based in Austria. With the mission to help people create better enterprises. And as such, we are doing webinars, we create books, and we run a conference. I have a couple of slides at the end of the presentation. And I'm one of the two presidents. And today, this event is featured by Intersection Group, our association. Let's dive into the topic. I mean, what went wrong with capability maps? Is it completely wrong? Might be a bit provocative. So when you Google, you can do it right now for capability maps. That's what you get. Colorful, lots of capability maps outside. So, but what's wrong? Why do we need a next generation? That was the topic of my webinar. And I have the view that it's still quite IT centered. So the concept of capability mapping came out of business schools from the 50s. So there are papers from Thiese and Penrose and so on, resource-based views, so more from this business school approach. And maybe 10, 15 years ago, some IT communities, Business Architecture Guild and maybe Open Group, discovered the topic and made it a bit too IT-ish, at least from our point of view. Out there, you can find some design patterns, but only few. So the question is, how do we design a good capability map? What does it mean? When is a capability map good? And I also have a couple of patterns in this webinar. Usually those maps are what I would say ugly, ill-aligned, ugly colors. So maybe the people who have drawn that were not the best graphical designers. So the IT guys usually. So, and the problem with this ugliness is that makes it sometimes quite hard to connect to the business people. So we must be aware that capability maps are still very, very present in the enterprise and business architecture space only. And they haven't made it to executives. So we use them in our small enterprise architecture departments of 10 people, but they are not really owned by the business. And that's what we want to change with Intersection Group and with the way what we propose, how we want to do capability model. So that's maybe our point of view. We believe there's a huge potential to seize more of the enormous potential of capability mapping. And that's the topic for today. So in the summary, what is it? What we as Intersection Group want to change? We want to make capabilities as a central instrument for organization design. Today, we have executives and somebody who structures the organization into departments and teams, and somebody else designs a capability map, which is also kind of a decomposition of the business. And I'm sure that you know this kind of tension, that somebody else already has a certain structuring of the business in departments, and that's the prevalent one. All people in the company know this organizational structure, and capabilities should be agnostic, or something totally different. We don't think that's a good idea. So what we want to have is to design one and only one, I like to call it a master structure. So apply some design patterns, cohesion, I will talk about it, and to find your modules. Yeah, so capability is kind of a cell of a business. Design it for clear outputs. So we are in line with the other bodies of knowledge that you should design it for clear outputs. And then you have certain business components, and you all know this Lego brick approach. Componentization is big in the IT world. It's not so big in the organizational design world, because organizations are not designed. They are structured by managers, by force, and so on. Yeah, and then we have this kind of master structure, and it's once you have it, it's pretty straightforward to derive the organizational and IT structures from this master structure. So that's maybe the big change from business IT alignment, so business structure, org chart, organizational units, and IT structures often attached to capabilities, so IT systems to capabilities. They shouldn't be aligned, they should be co-designed like that. And that's the way we see it and what we want to talk about today. But first of all, a definition. And 2 months ago, 3 months, almost 3 months ago, we launched EDGI, our enterprise design graphical language. And in this language, we have capabilities as a very important concept. And in EDGI, we say a capability is what we are able to do by orchestrating people and asset, what we can do. So when you look at this example from the railway industry, that's a capability track maintenance. So we have the capability, we can maintain our tracks, and it's very important if you need to operate that track, railway infrastructure and so on. And to maintain this track, you of course need some machines, that's an asset. You might need some gravel, some raw material if you want, some machines, a digger maybe or so, and of course people. Usually in a capability, there are fully automated capability as well, but quite often you have people operating the machines and so on. So that's a pretty straightforward and easy definition. And here for the very first time, you see this kind of component visualization. Yeah? So it's like a cell with a boundary, and inside this cell, reusable business component if you want, we have this people with a certain skill, team maybe with a certain skill. They perform certain activities or structured processes, yeah, like human resources or processing a claim in an insurance company. So that's a process. So people performing it using assets, very often IT assets. So IT applications, machines, raw material assets are all the objects, all the things we need to operate our business, to automate our activities better, to create a certain output. So capabilities should be designed for well-defined output, and they should be designed in a way that everything that belongs together is in this capability. But I will talk about this in a couple of minutes. So that's the example here, right? So this team performs the activity or process track maintenance, and they need a digger, a gravel, a trackinator that might be a software application, and the output is a serviceable track. So now the track works again, and the next train can pass across this track. So it's a serviceable track. It's a maintained track, if you want. That's pretty straightforward. I mean, people usually understand it. So what's so hard with capability maps? Why do we think most of capability maps approaches have huge problems in reality? That's the topic for today. Okay, yeah, I've talked about it. Design capabilities for well-defined outputs. It's about the modularization of the enterprise. So we want to bring this concept of loose coupling modularization that we engineers have learned at university. So if you ever implemented a piece of software, if you ever wrote a piece of code, you know that modularization is everything. You have methods and objects and modules, whatever, packages and so on. So in the world of software and in engineering, modularization to be adaptive and to have a modular flexible structure is a common thing. It's not so much in organizations. So the people structuring their organizations maybe haven't studied engineering, so they don't know what a business component is at all. And we believe capabilities can be used as this kind of Lego bricks to deliver an adaptive agile, maybe adaptivity, a prerequisite for agility. Yeah, and of course, the only reason why we need capabilities is we need to create our products. Of course, we need to be able to do some stuffs and to produce some intermediary outputs, maybe chains of outputs, and then we have the next capability that processes this output as an input and so on. But at the end, companies are about the creation of something, product, services, whatever. So that's a capability. And I've talked a bit about those assets, right? So in most of us today, probably from the IT space, and we think of IT applications, and that's what you see when you Google capability maps, right? You have those capability maps and you have IT applications assigned to the capabilities. And that's a very powerful approach, but be aware that IT is not maybe in some industries, the money goes into other assets. So if you're in an asset heavy industry, like in the railway business, think of machines, think of trains, think of buildings, think of travel, gravel and raw material and so on. So these are assets. So that's what you need in a capability, typically inside the capability, people, activities, and assets. And a couple of minutes ago, I was talking about together what belongs together, modules. And there's this very important concept of cohesion in IT. So if you're a software architect, I'm absolutely sure that you know this concept and it's pretty much straightforward. So like this water drop here. So that's the force of cohesion that keeps this drop together, because what's in there belongs together in a certain way. So what does it mean for capabilities? Together, what belongs together means that in this capability, you might have a team members, or you might have a set of IT applications or a set of other assets. And you have a strong coupling between them. That means you have a lot of communication inside the capabilities. So just think of a team performing a certain task, maintaining the track and so on. They talk to each other each and every day, and they use their applications and they use their asset and they use the stuff that belongs to that capabilities a lot. That means there's a strong cohesion that belongs together, but not so much maybe with other teams. So the parallel concept, loose coupling, you know that, is if you want to design for adaptivity, that means you want to minimize the interactions between capabilities, maybe between teams performing those capabilities. That means that each capability should have a clear accountability. So the output should be clear, and this group of people together with assets performing these processes is accountable to creating a certain output that might be needed for product creation. And that's another capability design principle, is to avoid redundancy as much as possible. So you want to have tasks that are different. You don't want to have teams performing overlapping processes, usually also for coupling reasons, right? Because then you have an adaptive team. You want to avoid this kind of redundancy. You want to minimize interactions between capabilities, and that's the key to adaptivity. The reason why the whole agile hype is on the decline is that it's not only about changing the way of working, right? So the agile community proposed that we should do sticky notes and Scrum and Safe and whatever, and it's always about the way of working. How do we work together? That's only one thing you need for agility. The other thing is, and you need an adaptive structure. So if you're IT and your teams and your organization and your capabilities are not designed for adaptivity, are not modular, then a company can never be agile. And that's maybe one criticism of this agile hype. So we should talk much more about adaptivity, a structural property of an architecture. So think of those capabilities as the building blocks, as the Lego blocks with well-defined outputs, a serviceable track, a processed claim, a new contract, if you're in the human resource department, a new working contract for an employee. These are clear outputs. And then go back and say, okay, what do I need for this output to process a claim? I need an IT claim processing system. I don't know, whatever, as certain skilled people and so on. Those building blocks should have clear boundaries, should be clear what's inside of claims processing and what's outside. They should be designed for adaptivity and for reuse. So this Lego brick idea capability help us to bring this Lego block idea from the IT space only to the organizational design and asset/IT. So we want to co-design IT and organizational structures in one, with one concept. That's the major difference. So let's have a look at a capability map of a railway company in that case. And what you see here, and that's, you must be familiar with this way of mapping. What you usually have in a capability map is a hierarchy, right? You have at the bottom a railway infrastructure management capability, and inside we have planning, building and maintaining, resource management, and so on. And in building and maintaining, for example, we need to do project management, construction site planning, power plants, stations. We need to maintain the stations, the tracks, the power lines, and so on. And if you ever created a capability map, maybe you say, okay, so what? That's common, nothing new. There is something new inside of this. So we will talk about this in an instance. But yeah, so it looks quite classical, and it's a hierarchy of capabilities, and they are quite well aligned and so on, and layouted for beauty, as I will show in a couple of seconds. So there are groupings, right? So that if you look at this capability map, it looks straightforward, right? Of course, this is a railway company with some passenger services, with some train operations, so that you need to do train scheduling, run trains, night trains, energy management, and so on. But the problematic and the challenging stuff with capabilities is to find the criteria for the grouping. So if we look at this example here, so this is a beautiful park of flowers, maybe. And when you group certain activities together with people and assets, you always need to decide what is the criteria for the grouping. In that case, for the flowers, I could decide, okay, I have the green and the red and the purple flowers, or you could say, okay, I group them by bigger, smaller, medium-sized flowers by shape, yeah, for example, by species and so on. So be aware that there are always, when you group stuff, whatever you want to group into certain groups, you must always decide what is the dimension. And when it comes to business, it's not always straightforward what is the best way to group tasks and processes. And we will see in an instance that you have two choices to decompose. Belongs together in an enterprise context. If you follow the work of other authorities, and we know there are other authorities proposing the concept of capabilities in a certain way, and they say you should always decompose a business capability by an object, like a power line. So like on the left side. So I could say um, this light here, so this traffic light or whatever you call this appliance here, this light here. I say, okay, I have this light maintenance, right? Or I can say I do claims processing, so or management and so on. And the other way could be to decompose it by activity. In that case, this lady does logistics. So the focus is not on the object. She does logistics maybe for hundreds of different kinds of objects. And maybe that's a difference to other bodies of knowledge. We don't think that it's very clever to always use the object for decomposition, because quite often it's natural to decompose by activities. And I have an example for you, because that's a bit abstract probably, but it's an important thing here. So let's jump into this railway infrastructure management example back again. So what you see here, you have the capability railway infrastructure management. That's the highest capability. So that's the level 0 or level 1 capability if you want. And then you say, okay, I need to do the project management and the construction site planning. In that case, so I created this capability map for a real railway companies a couple of years ago, simplified it a bit for this webinar, is by activity. So the reason is project management is an activity that is very similar, no matter if I do project management to create stations or change tracks. And in reality, this railway company, they also had a project management department. And this project management department sent their people to projects for doing stations, building tracks, and building power lines, and so on. That means that the cohesion was much stronger amongst the tasks, or the specialization between the different kinds of assets for the task is not that important. If you're a good project manager, you are able to manage a project that creates a new station or create a new track for that reason. So what we say, the cohesion driven by activity is stronger than the cohesion driven by the object. But that changes, right? So if you say building and maintaining, for example, maintaining stations, maintaining tracks, maintaining power lines. So these are the people, the workers, right? They are specialized. So that means that if you want to maintain a power line, you must be an electrician, totally different education, totally different skill, totally different assets you need, and so on. And if you want to maintain a station or a power plant, is highly specialized. So that means in that case, the object drives the modularization. So we make the decision, okay, we don't group it for power plant, station tracks, and power lines. We don't group it by the task. We group it by the object. And yes, Dorte, it's okay to mix capabilities grouped by objects and activities. And it's happening. I mean, in reality, when you look at org charts, as you say, okay, org charts are a way how executives structure their departments. And it's always a mixture. And so that's maybe the similarity. It's absolutely okay, but you must make an intentional decision, and it's the skill of the designer of this capability map to find out what drives the cohesion better. So is there a similarity in the task, in the activity, or is there a similarity driven by the object? Okay, I will answer the next question after the meeting, after the presentation. Okay, so be aware that you need always to decide what belongs together, and it's not about decomposition by object and calling everything management, what you see in other bodies of knowledge propose that. So if you look at the internet, you have human resource management and claims management and whatever, and that's the result when you focus only on the object. Then you have the weak verb of management. We believe the activities must be strong. Whenever the activity is special and is distinctive from other activities, you should decompose by activities. And the next thing are those groupings. So if you can do it right now, if you Google capability maps, what you find is there is no common top level structure usually. So different companies, different consultancies, tool vendors use very different top level structures. So for example, if you're familiar with process management, process modeling, they have this kind of management processes, operational processes, support processes. You could also decompose capabilities, structure them by we have management capabilities, operational capabilities, and support capabilities. You could do that, and that's a bit similar. And what we did, we browsed the internet for various, how are people doing it? There's no common way, no usually. And with intersection group, currently we propose a certain structure. So what we say, usually it's clever to have something like customer interaction. So group these passenger services, for example, night services. What is it? How do we interact with the customer? Where do we provide our services? Which are our channels maybe? So you have these night services, for example, the concierge and the night services here. Or you need to sell your tickets. You need the passenger information. You have a train restaurant and so on. And maybe it's a good idea to group things in something like customer interaction on top. I always do that when I create a capability map. We believe it's a good idea. And then you have operational capabilities. So train operations and railway infrastructure management. These two are the operational capabilities below the customer interaction. So that's how we run our business. And then you have those support capabilities to the right here. They are pretty straightforward, right? So that's quite easy to create in a company. So human resources, facility management, risk management, IT operations, finance, risk, and so on. And they are very similar also between companies, right? So every company has the capability to do human resources or to create the contracts and educate their people and so on. Every company has, of course, the support capability to do executive management and so on. That's pretty straightforward, these support capabilities. And then we added a category, and I would always recommend to make it explicit, the change capabilities. Make visible what you do or what you should be able to do in the future to change your business. So on the left side here, you have to run the business. So that's our current railway business. But we know, right, ecosystems change, context change, and so on, that you must always be adaptive to change. But you should do things like research and development, enterprise design, innovation, product management, create new products, and so on, customer and market analytics, IT changes, and so on. And we highly recommend to make this explicit because these groupings are important, because when you use these groupings for management purposes and to attach money and budgets and strategic planning, strategic goals, then you make things visible and explicit. Quite often, companies are not aware how little they do for the change capabilities, for example. So, as a summary, what we propose are 4 categories of capabilities, right? So we have this customer facing, get in touch with our customer, typically sales, customer services, customer interactions, right? Ticket sales, customer facing. I usually model it on top. And then operational, that's what we need to create our products, like manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, order processing. You all know that. Maybe also one tip, make your products visible there. So I've seen many capability maps and I was unable to see, is this an insurance company? Is this a bank? Is this whatever this is? Because the abstraction level was not concrete enough. So I want, when I look at the capability map, I want to see in an instance, oh, this is a railway infrastructure, because they maintain the track. Be concrete enough, and usually it's in the operational capabilities. Yeah, and these shared capabilities, that's what you need to perform other capabilities. We all know that, marketing, legal, accounting, that stuff. Change, it's about innovation, quite often strategic management, product design, and these examples. So what do we invest in change? What are we doing to change our business, to stay adaptive and so on? So that's about the categories. But maybe even more important is the way how you create a good capability models. And I've seen many companies and their processes, how they create it. And all too often, it's done by the enterprise architects in the IT space. Yes, with some interviews of the business people, but they've never made it to the B-level executives, maybe to the executives board. Usually they don't make it to the top level and make it a real management instrument, but that's what we want to achieve. We want, with our capability maps, we want to be in the offices of all employees and also of the C-suite, right? It's this one map, that's us, that's what we are able to do. Finally, that's where we want to do. So how can you run an elicitation process, a healthy elicitation process? Maybe it's very important to understand that it's much more about communications as you think, and it's much more work to create this railway map I showed you. Took me maybe 1 year or so, because you need to talk to 40, 50 business people. Then you go to the executives, then you have some political battles and so on. But usually I start with existing wisdom, existing process product models, existing org charts maybe. So when I do a capability model, when I'm new in a company, I always get stuff, whatever I can get. So documentation of in the intranet, maybe there are the products on the web page, maybe there is a mission statement or somebody says, oh, what we are doing and so on. And then there are all too often, very often, at least in Europe, existing process models. There is a process management department. They've been around for 50 years or so. That's also a good input, even if the process models are usually quite weak and don't reflect what's really going on in a company. I've never seen a process model that was really showing what the company does, right? So that's the first step. And what I do then is I sketch a capability map, a very first draft for my own, and then I have hundreds of questions because it's never consistent. The org chart is not consistent with the process model. The product model says something different. The web page says something different. Terminology is not used consistently at all, and so on. So it's a mess. So what I make visible is that the various views on the enterprise that are existing are not consistent. And with the capability model, I want to make it consistent. I want to help people to find a clear terminology at the end. And I want to have when I design a clean capability model, I'm quite strict with finding clear terminology and not a fussy one. That's what we have in companies. And when I'm ready, maybe after 1 month or so, with the first model for my own, I try to find the 5 or 10, I like to call them seasoned outliers. So these are people that have been in this company for 30 years and that really know what's going on. And then I say, okay, that's my sketch of this capability map. I don't understand because in this process model, that's not consistent with the product chart. For me, the abstraction, the capability should be like that. What's your opinion? And what I always hear, always is, well, the process people, they have no clue what's going on in the company. I've been around for 30 years, the process guy. We have a young guy. He has no clue what's going on in the railway business. They are just modeling processes for compliance reasons and so on. And then you can go talk to this first business expert. Okay, help me. So that's my map. That's my understanding. And then he or she takes just a pen, yeah, and then you scribble with them, with one person. And then your map gets much, much better because the wisdom of this person is in this map now. But this person usually only knows one part of the business. So you must be aware that you need 5, 10, 15, usually have 5 to 10 of those you really, really seasoned experts in this company. And after that, I cross-check it with application owners, IT or other business people who own certain business applications. So I challenge this more abstract know-how from the processes, from the business experts with what is actually implemented. So I always look at the major core systems and their major functionality, menu structures, and so on, because that's the reality. That's what is implemented. And when you cross-check what's going on in the application, if you talk to the application owners, you cross-check it with the business experts, you will still find inconsistencies. So maybe you must go back to a business expert and ask him again. So it's a very iterative process between business experts, application owners, and so on, until you are ready and your model is good enough that all the business experts say, yeah, that's good. Maybe it's a compromise. It's not perfect. Yeah, okay, let's agree for now. It looks okay, this capability map, and then you are ready to go to the B-level executives. So not to the highest level, of course. And then you have really a big trouble because then it gets political. Usually these guys in all companies I've seen are eager to defend their claim. So they're not so interested in transparency. They are not so interested in this modularity and in clear accountabilities. Maybe they are the heads of a department and they have 150 people that report to them. And of course, they want to keep their people and so on. So be aware that the B-level executives are not the people that are really interested in your work, and you will run into political conflicts. I've had this almost every time when I did the capability map. But be aware. So once you go, take your time until you go to them, and then you must say, okay, I've talked to these senior business experts. That's their knowledge. So what's not right here? Please help me, and so on. So what you bring to them is transparency, and maybe they don't like transparency for reasons. I think all know why and that this happens. So that then it gets a bit political. Yeah, and finally, what you must achieve, and this can take at least 1 year, is that you must find a meeting with the executive board, the C-suite. And these people are interested in transparency. At least that's my experience, right? So the people who are really interested that the company is adaptive and you have clear accountabilities between the departments and so on is the C-suite. So try to be friend with them as early as possible. Try to get their trust. Try to get an appointment when you think it's the right point in time. But of course, you need allies. So now it gets political. Yeah. So this nice little map with clear accountability. This sounds really nice. But when you are in this phase, B-level executives and executive board, then you need all of your social skills, and you need strong allies, and you need people who want the transparency, right? So you need to somehow deal with corporate politics, because you bring transparency to a group of humans where most of them are not really interested in transparency. So you must have some enemies, but the friend is on top of the company. Be aware. So you need your social skills to go there. So as a summary, some capability design patterns involve a broad range of business experts. Usually enterprise architects don't take enough time to talk to them. It takes a year. A capability map takes a year at least until it's finished, until it's good enough. Use common terminology. Use your capability map also to clarify terms. I always start with a glossary in parallel to the capability map. And most companies I'm working with, they don't have a clear glossary and so on. But with capabilities, you need a clear terminology. If you don't have clear terminology, your whole architecture falls apart. Yeah? Clear terminology is the foundation of a clear architecture, especially for capabilities. Make products visible. I've seen too many capability maps where I'm not sure they were so abstract. So that I think usually the major product groups should be visible as level 1 capabilities. Use categories consciously. So that what we propose with this customer facing operational shared and change capabilities is a suggestion. You might use them a bit differently, or you might focus on other categories, but use them consciously, because if you make it to the C-suite, and what you want to achieve is that they use their capability map for all of their strategic decisions. So the whole company starts thinking in this structure. Yeah, and you can imagine how powerful it is if the whole company has this change. What is it what we need to change to make this more present? Yeah, we need to invest in better enterprise design, enterprise architecture, and so on. How much do we invest in change related to operations and so on? That's use categories consciously is very important pattern. Design for clear outputs. We are not the only authority who says that. Yes, that's really true. So what's the clear output of this capability? Avoid overlaps. So capabilities should be redundancy free. Focus on the essence. I've seen capability maps with 700 capabilities. Keep it pragmatic. Usually I do 3 levels, sometimes 4 maybe. Yeah, but maybe not. So in a medium-sized company, maybe hundreds of capabilities. It's not about drilling down into every little detail. What you want to create, you want to make it a management instrument. It should fit on one page, for example, maybe a big page, A3 page, or so on, and so on. But focus on the essence and be aware it's a management instrument, and it's not a description of your task and detailed description of the tasks of the businesses. You can describe your processes, of course, elsewhere, and you can create, you can describe the tasks in these processes in the process model if you want, and align the process model to a capability. That's fine, but keep your capability map a management instrument. Yeah, so for me, usually 3 to 4 levels, not more than 100 capabilities could be a rule of thumb, maybe. And the line box as well, that's a trivial one. But if you go to the internet, there are so many ugly little fonts. And you know what you must create is this management attention effect. It must be beautifully aligned. So if you go to the C-suite and the boxes are like that, they won't even have a look at this one. So beauty is important in capability modeling. Of course it is. Yeah, so another summary, maybe. What we think is that today capability maps use uncommon language quite often. You have human resource management, everything management, and that's not the terminology the business uses. And today they are exclusively might be a bit too blunt, but most of the time it's a tool for enterprise architects that is not accepted by business as their structure. So it's more a structure. How do we structure our IT applications? It's more like little drawers where you dump in your IT application, but it's not a thing to design the organization. What we want to change is that we want these capability maps or boards to be co-designed by all relevant business experts. We want to involve them in a broad co-design approach. It's not us to design it. So we want them to truly own them, to feel the power and what they. It means that they must unlearn a lot of stuff. That's also quite hard because they're used to think in organizational structures only, in processes, but nobody understands, nobody really says the processes are what we are actually doing. Yeah, and you want the capability map to be used throughout the company for management, finance, IT, strategy. So where are our strategic field of actions for OKRs, for example? How much do we invest in these capabilities? How much does this capability cost and so on? So finally, it should be the foundation for the SAP cost center structure, for example. So it's the one main structure of the business. We are far away from this situation in all companies I've seen. So that's a vision, absolutely a vision. Okay. So let me skip that. Okay. But then how to design capabilities, and what you see here is a big picture of EDGI, our enterprise design language. And what you see is that capabilities are one element of this language here in blue in the architecture space. So when you do a product-oriented capability design, you can start from your products. So we need to maintain the track, we need to run the trains, we need to process the claim, we need to sell an insurance, we need to sell, I don't know, an account and so on. So you have a certain product, and for this product, you need certain capabilities. And for a capability, you might need another capability and so on. So in that scenario, the products we want to launch drive the capabilities. And then you first start thinking in capabilities and then in organizations. And maybe that's a big unlearning for many companies, most companies, that you don't go from product to organization immediately, because that means that in this approach, you co-design assets like IT stuff, processes, so what you're doing concretely, and organization in one seamless approach. So we believe organizational structuring by brute force, by executives, should be the history. And in future, we should come up with designing capabilities that include assets, processes, and the organization. So that's driven by products. But what also could be that you have an existing company. So the first could be maybe a startup. So a startup and you want to launch certain products. So which products do I want to launch? Which assets do I need? And so on. In an existing company, it's very different. You always have legacy. You always have legacy products, and you always have legacy assets. You always have legacy organizations. So that's this exploration phase I mentioned in this elicitation circle. So that means that you need to understand what's in place. What assets do we own? What are our strengths? What processes do we have? How are we structured today? And with capabilities, you show the inconsistencies between the several views on the companies. So the process models are never right. Organizations are always weakly structured. We know them quite often for political reasons, for many reasons. We all know them. Nobody has ever worked in a really well-designed organization. Maybe that's a bit too provocative. And with capabilities, we have a concept to bring this all together, show the inconsistencies, ask difficult questions, and help people to redesign their IT assets, their processes, and their organizations. So you ask difficult questions by modeling those capabilities. Okay, so what you've learned in this session so far. We believe there should only be one decomposition of the business, only one leading decomposition of the business. The others should be derived. So it's kind of strange that you have an org structure and a process model, and they are not in line. And then you have IT platforms, yeah, and, that are also modularized, but very different from the org chart. That's kind of strange. We believe that capability design, this decomposition should be kind of a master structure, and others can be derived from that. Start from existing docs, existing wisdom, run the broad elicitation process. It takes more time than you expect. Take this time. People should own that. enable business to own their capability design, involve them in a broad co-design process. It's their capabilities. They must own it at the end. You're only a facilitator. If you're in an IT department, wherever you are located as an enterprise architect, usually in the IT department, what you really want to achieve is that they own it. I've never seen that. I'm working on that in my companies, yeah, right? But I've never seen that elsewhere. Design for hire cohesion together what belongs together, yeah, by activity or by object. There's always a decision. Select categories with care. We've had that. Customer facing, operational, shared, and change capabilities. Consolidate the process models with the capabilities. That's a tough one because there's already a process department and their processes are usually not really reflecting what's really going on, and they're not really used usually for changes for the future state processes. So that can be a bit of a conflict. Layout for beauty maybe, and what we really want to achieve is at one sentence, so maybe that's the bottom line of today's presentation. What we really want to achieve is from business IT alignment to a really business IT co-design. We want to co-design the IT structures and the org structures and the processes and so on within the same modularization concept within the capability concept. Okay, that's about capability mapping, and I have maybe 3 minutes and then we will come to your questions. Just a few words about who we are. We've been founded 3 years. We were founded 3 years ago, and we are not-for-profit association. And 2 months ago, we launched a language that's maybe our first product. If you go to enterprise.design, it's a set of open source tools for your enterprise design practice. The first tool is a language, and the capabilities are one, but only one of the important concepts we have in this language. So I think it pays off if you go to enterprise.design and see around how capabilities are connected to the tasks of the customer, to the customer journeys and so on, and how they are connected to purposes and so on. So that's Edge is much bigger than only capabilities. We run community and events, so there will be a conference in September in Vienna. And we are focusing on learning on knowledge. So we publicate our first book, Enterprise Design Patterns. We published it 2.5 years ago. So that's us. So we have this product, we run community events and we publish books. So there's a lot of enterprisedesignpatterns.com. A lot of stuff that I won't talk today is also in this book. Explore existing wisdom, how to build trust with executives, how to get your social skills you need for capability as elicitation. So I think the patterns here, the subtitle is 35 ways to radically increase your impact on the enterprise. It's not about capability mapping, but the patterns are general purpose. So you can use them for process modeling, for service design, and so on. Yeah, so that's again enterprise design. So that's the full model here. Today we only were talking about those capabilities, a bit of assets and process and organization. So today we were deeply into this blue facet, but there's same story with experience, so journeys and so on. If you're interested, you can also join us for other webinars. If you go to our events page, there are other webinars as well. So you stay tuned. Intersection group /events. So next week we will be presenting Edgy. So if you're curious to learn more about the whole language, register for next week. So to Bart and Milan, to other authors of Edgy, will present the whole approach, and capabilities are big there. And we have other webinars and the conference in Vienna, of course. I'm super proud that we invite the community, enterprise design community, to Vienna in September, also on our events page. So if you have time, I really would like to invite you to the city that gave birth to me, to Vienna, September 18 and 19. So please stay tuned. And that completes this presentation. And I see a couple of questions in the chat. Let me turn on the Q&A mode. And let me have a look at your questions. Okay, I think I answered that one already. Is it okay to mix capabilities, group objects and activities? Yes, it's okay. You should always do that. And the criteria is the specialization. Is the object special? that you need a different skill, for example, to maintain the power lines or you maintain the track, then you should specialize it in the object. But if the activity is special, like project management, then you should decompose it by the activity. Okay, and then we have the next question. If skill is the underlying criteria, are you not grouping by skill set rather than this or the other? I mean, skill can be a criteria for the decomposition. You can say the activities are specialized, or you could also say the skill to perform this activity is specialized. That can be. It can also be that a certain machine drives the specialization, right? So if you have flattening the track, for example, then have a very specialized machine to make the completely flat track, then maybe the machine is specialized and drives the cohesion, for example. Yeah, but it can be skills. In the example of project management or procurement, do you not perpetuate existing business architectures for which there could be transformation and synergies gained? Yeah, of course. I mean, I think in the shared capabilities there are, and I know that Business Architecture Guild, they work on domain-specific capability maps. You can use them as an example as a template. Makes a whole lot of sense, especially in the shared, right? So if you're in a special domain, probably you won't find a domain-specific capability map, but in the shared capability, it can make a whole lot of sense to use them, of course. Yes. How to get executive sponsorship for these initiatives? Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Usually you start in the IT space, right? And if you start as an enterprise architect space, somebody hires you for managing and taking care of a set of IT applications. So you are the IT guy. So that's on your head, written there. I'm the IT guy. Yeah? But of course, you need to find some structure, how you structure your IT. And that's where this capability stuff starts. I want to know, why do we need this capability, this IT application? And then you draw your first capability model and so on. And then you have the conflicts with the business people. And then it can be really tough. So what I usually do, I try to find allies. So I try to talk to seasoned experts, and usually they have some influence, and I go to the process model. And be aware that your CIO, if you're reporting to the CIO, should be your friend and must support you. Yeah, so build trust, talk to them, yeah, that walk your talk. So there are some pattern in the book, for example, to build to get this executive sponsorship. So if you're interested, go to enterprisedesignpatterns.com. Executive buy-in is one of the patterns and described there. This is a classic question, so thanks for that. How can we differentiate between capabilities and function? I've never got the difference, to be honest. I know that enterprise architects can discuss this for hours on LinkedIn, but I always stepped away from that. So for me, that's not important. And we don't, in Edgy, we don't have the concept of function. And I think it's an abstraction. The only thing, I mean, in Edgy, we only have 4 base elements, and these are not arguable. So you can't discuss them. And that's people. Yeah, they are just there. It's not an abstraction. Activities, what those people do, and you can observe it. So that's also the reality. Outcomes, so what they will achieve, and assets, objects, right? So that's the reality. Everything else are just abstractions. And I could have used the term function, I could have used capabilities, I could have used the term business components. That's not so important. But important is to have a boundary of stuff, people and assets and processes that belongs together to create a certain output. So that's the reason I don't think it's clever to have functions and capabilities. Next one, who is the responsible of identifying the business? Who has the responsibility probably of identifying the business capabilities? Well, usually, all too often it starts in the IT department, because the application portfolio management needs a certain structure and there is none. right? So that's where it starts. But I don't think it's the responsibility of the IT. It should become a responsibility of the management. And that's a vision we have as Intersection Group. We want to bring the concept of capability modeling to executives. It's not there yet. Yeah, so I would say in the future, we are working hard that it is the accountability of everybody in the company, or maybe the managers that are on duty. So they should, instead of only structuring the organization in teams or departments, they should design, or with our help, should design their capabilities. It's theirs, right? So, but that's a vision for the future. What the granular terminology for capability is, stays as people, process, and technology. I'm not sure if I understand this one. So I would say a capability includes people with certain skills, performing certain processes, activities, using certain assets to create outputs. That's the capability story. And so I'm not sure if I understood this one right. So is Trainline a product or an asset? I'm not sure if I understand what Trainline is. So it can be a brand. So maybe if you help me with this one, I don't know what Trainline is. If product types are added into the capability map, how do we uncover duplications? Yeah. That's a big one. I mean, that's not a trivial one. Let's assume you are a car manufacturer, a German car manufacturer, and you manufacture convertibles and motorcycles and trucks, let's say. Yeah? So you have three very different product categories. And then you must make the decision, is truck manufacturing so different from convertible manufacturing and maybe car manufacturing, or is it something different? Because if it's very different, then you usually have multiple product lines. There might be some shared capabilities. So if you decide, and that's a design decision, that's really a business question, and you say, okay, this product is so different from this product, then it's a different capabilities. But if your car products are similar, so if you product a lot of very similar cars, and you have motorcycles, but motorcycles are very different from cars. Within cars, you have a couple, but they are similar. Then it makes sense to have only two categories, one for motorcycles and one for cars, for example. And of course, you might have a lot of shared capabilities like logistics and supply chain management that you can reuse for all of your product groups. Yeah, but of course, you cannot have zero duplication. So that's also need to say. Okay, anything else? We're running out of time. So maybe last one or two questions. So let me quit with this question here, and then I need to go. One problem is that the word capability is used in so many ways. We need to establish this usage of the term first, digital capability and so on. That's true, and that's what we want to achieve with Edgy, with our language, where we have clear definitions. So if you go to enterprise.design, you can learn about it a lot. All right, so we are running out of time. Thank you very much for your attention and all your beautiful questions. Stay tuned. So connect to us on LinkedIn. We also run a Slack channel. If you message me after that, we can continue the discussion on Slack. And looking forward to meeting many of you in one of our next webinars. So see you soon. Bye-bye.